I didn't realize something was wrong with my apartment at first. It started with small things. Every night after 9 o'clock, something inside my apartment would move. Not while I was looking. Not with loud noises or slamming doors. I'd simply notice that my coffee mug was sitting in the sink, even though I had left it on the table. A chair would be pulled away from my desk. The hallway closet door would be cracked open just a few inches, just enough to make me wonder if I had forgotten to close it. During the day, everything was completely normal. That's why I convinced myself I was just tired. A few months earlier, my grandmother had passed away and left me her apartment in Cleveland, Ohio. It was an old apartment building from the 70s. Most of the tenants were elderly. By 8 at night, the hallways became silent. The laundry room closed. The elevators barely moved. It felt like the building simply went to sleep. I worked remotely translating technical manuals, so some weeks I barely spoke to another person. When you're alone that much, you stop trusting your own memory. So when strange things happened, I blamed myself. Until one night, I was heating soup in the microwave. My phone buzzed in the living room, so I walked away for maybe 20 seconds. When I came back, a spoon was sitting next to the bowl. I hadn't taken one out. I opened the kitchen drawer. One spoon was missing. I remember standing there trying to convince myself I'd simply forgotten. Then it happened again. I carried groceries inside and left the bags by the front door while I washed my hands. Less than a minute later, the bags were sitting in the kitchen, perfectly arranged beside the counter. Nothing had fallen out. No signs anyone had touched them. It looked exactly as if I had carried them there myself. Except, I knew I hadn't. That's when I checked the security camera I'd installed in my apartment months earlier. The footage made no sense. It showed me entering with the groceries. It showed me leaving them by the front door. It showed me walking toward the bathroom. Then, the recording simply ended. No glitch. No static. The video just stopped. The last frame showed the hallway, and my utility closet door. Slightly open. The closet had always bothered me. It hadn't been part of the original apartment. Years ago, someone had built it by closing off part of the hallway with drywall. Inside were old boxes, paint cans, cleaning supplies, and things my grandmother had never thrown away. It always felt colder in there, even during the summer. At first I ignored it. Then I started paying attention. At exactly 8:55 p.m., the closet would be closed. At 9:08, it would be open a few inches. At 9:20, the gap would be wider, as if someone inside was slowly pushing the door open. I wedged a dining chair against it before going to bed. The next morning, the chair was back against the wall. The closet door was closed. I couldn't remember moving it. That should have been enough for me to leave. Instead, I became obsessed. Every night I watched the clock. 9:03, nothing. 9:07. The first creak, not from the closet, from the hallway floor. One slow step, then another. The hardwood floors in that hallway had always creaked. I knew exactly which boards made noise. Whoever was walking stepped on every single one of them, slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to wake another person inside the apartment. I'd jump off the couch and run into the hallway. Nothing. Every time, just the closet door, slightly open. One night I grabbed a flashlight and opened it immediately. The shelves were exactly the way I'd left them. Boxes, old blankets, a broken vacuum cleaner, nothing else. But the air felt wrong. It wasn't just cold. It felt dead, like opening the door to a room that had been sealed for decades. I slammed the door shut. The next evening I wrapped a leather belt around the handle and tied it to a heavy bookshelf. At 9:34, I heard something fall. The belt was lying on the floor. The bookshelf hadn't moved. The knot hadn't come undone. It was as if someone had simply lifted the belt off its handle. The next afternoon I decided to clean the closet once and for all. I pulled everything onto the hallway floor. Boxes, old photo albums, paint cans, suitcases. Behind a stack of dusty storage bins, I found a small metal lockbox. I'd never seen it before. It was covered in thick gray dust, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. The lock had rusted away. Inside, there were old photographs, a heavy brass key, and a thin notebook. The first page contained only one sentence, written over and over. "Do not open the door after 9 p.m. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was exactly the kind of thing I didn't want to read after everything that had already happened. I turned the page. The entries were dated nearly 20 years earlier. The writer described hearing footsteps every night after 9. Someone standing outside the apartment. Never knocking. Never speaking. If they looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Then I reached one sentence that made my stomach drop. My son says he hears his mother calling from inside the closet. She keeps saying she's cold. I looked at my phone. 8:58 p.m. I don't know why, but I stopped reading. Because for the first time, I wasn't worried about what had already happened. I was terrified of what was about to happen next. I closed the notebook and locked the metal box inside my bedroom. I told myself I'd finish reading it in the morning. I never got the chance. At exactly 9:07, the hallway floor creaked. One step, silence, another step. It sounded exactly like someone walking from my front door toward the utility closet. Slowly, carefully. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I owned. Not because I thought it would help, just because holding something felt better than standing there empty-handed. The apartment was silent. Then, a soft knock came from inside the closet. Just one. I froze. Another knock. Then a third. Not loud. More like someone accidentally bumping into a wall in a very small space. I should have left. I know that now. Instead, I walked closer. Cold air poured through the crack beneath the door. It wasn't a draft. It felt like opening the freezer at a grocery store. Then I heard it. A woman's voice. So quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "Please." A pause. "I'm cold." Every muscle in my body locked up. The voice sounded exhausted. Not angry. Not threatening. Just, tired. "Please open the door." I stared at the handle. Then I remembered the notebook. My son says he hears his mother calling from inside the closet. I stepped backward. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, everything became completely silent. Then, someone slowly dragged their fingers down the inside of the closet door. Scratch. 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 I ran. Not out of the apartment. Into my bedroom. I locked the door. And spent the rest of the night sitting against it with every light in the apartment turned on. Nothing else happened. At sunrise, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. Daylight has a way of making fear seem ridiculous. I decided to tear the closet apart. I borrowed tools from a neighbor and removed every shelf. Once they were gone, I noticed something I'd never seen before. Behind the back wall was a thin vertical crack, Cold air was pouring through it. I cut away part of the drywall. Behind it was an insulation. It was empty space, a narrow cavity running between two walls, too small for an adult, big enough for a child. I aimed my flashlight inside. The beam landed on something gray, a child's sneaker, just one. Next to it was a woman's leather glove, a faded winter hat, old photographs, wallets, keys, dozens of random belongings, as if someone had been collecting things in that space for years. Then my flashlight reached the far end. At first, I thought it was a pile of dirty blankets. Then I realized it was hair, long, dark, matted into the dust. I stumbled backwards so hard I hit the hallway wall. The police arrived less than 20 minutes later. They removed the entire section of drywall. Behind the wall they found human remains. They later confirmed there were at least 2 victims. The investigation reopened a missing persons case that had been cold for almost 20 years. Months later, investigators eventually identified the remains as a woman and her teenage son. Detectives asked how I found the hidden space. I lied. I told them I'd noticed cold air coming through the wall. I never mentioned the footsteps, or the voice, or the notebook. Nobody would have believed me anyway. The police spent the next 2 days searching the apartment. The hidden space stretched farther than anyone expected. Investigators believed it had been sealed sometime in the early 2000s. No one had ever thought to look inside the walls. They never found out who had written it. No fingerprints, no name, no handwriting match. The last pages were never finished. There were only 2 unfinished sentences. If anyone ever finds this, please let them out. After the police removed the remains, workers demolished the hidden cavity completely. The walls were rebuilt. The utility closet disappeared forever. That night, for the first time since I'd moved into my grandmother's apartment, nothing happened. No footsteps. No chair scraping across the floor. No closet door opening by itself. The silence felt different. Not empty. Peaceful. A few weeks later, the detective called. The victims had finally been identified. Their surviving relatives were coming to claim the remains. They would finally be buried together. I've lived here ever since. Nothing strange has happened again. Sometimes I still catch myself looking toward the end of the hallway around 9 o'clock. Old habits die hard. The closet isn't there anymore. Just a smooth painted wall. Most people would probably say everything had a logical explanation. That stress made me imagine the voices. That coincidence led me to the hidden space. But there's one thing I never managed to explain. When the construction crew tore down the old wall, they found nothing that should have made the wall cold. The detective told me the walls had been completely dry, no pipes, no vents, nothing capable of producing that kind of cold. I never argued, because by then, the apartment finally felt like a home again. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to stay after 9. Sometimes, a place isn't haunted because something evil lives there. Sometimes, it's haunted because someone was never allowed to leave. If you've made it this far, you're ready for the next story. It's already waiting on the channel.